It's still like 4 Celsius outside. Can I not leave my blanket? I really do wish that someday Caltina would sponsor me. That would be like my dream sponsor on YouTube. To be honest, I didn't really plan on shooting any video today, but the window light is so nice and soft. I feel like I need to turn the camera on and start talking. I think what I want to share with you today is my take on working at the big lab like the LIGO lab versus the smaller lab like the gravitational wave lab at ANU. Well, when I say small, it's actually not small. It is still quite a big lab compared to a university lab scales, but it definitely has a structure of a smaller labs of a university's lab, and the lab composes of more than one experiment. And as usual, I keep forgetting to introduce myself. My name is Natsini Kitmanchu. I am a final year PhD student in physics here at the Australian National University, working on the quantum squeezing technology for the future gravitational wave detectors. I had the opportunity to work at both the large-scale laboratories such as the LIGO sites and the smaller scale lab here at ANU. I was at LIGO Hanford for 2.5 years as an operations specialist prior to my PhD. It means that I pushed lots of buttons. I was back for a little more than a year helping build the quantum squeezer at the LIGO Hanford site as part of the advanced LIGO detector upgrade. Let's start on my take of what it's like working at a big lab, the LIGO lab. And then I will continue to talk about my experience here at ANU Lab so that you kind of have two big pictures and you can sort of compare them in your head. I guess this video is for somebody who's just curious in general and maybe somebody who's looking to move lab and try to decide whether or not to jump to the bigger lab or the smaller lab. So in a big lab, you would have to follow someone else's schedule pretty much all the time because, the LIGO lab is funded by the NSF, is funded by taxpayer money, and they have milestones to be reached, they have deadlines to be made because LIGO needs to keep getting funding from the NSF. So when I was there as a grad student working on a squeezer, I would be working like typically 12 to 15 hours a day during the time that we were building this stuff. And I wasn't alone. I was with another postdoc also from ANU, and we were both kind of in charge of this little corner of the LIGO lab. And we would spend 12-15 hours a day building these things. And even when the building part's over, it still needs to be commissioned. So my typical day would still be 10 to 12 hours a day. I rarely have 8 hours a day. That just doesn't happen at the LIGO lab. I feel like the chill day would be 10-hour day, I would say. I think partly that is because there's not that many people at the site who can push the detector to be operational by the deadline. If you're an experimental physicist, this is the best place to be, but sadly, both LIGO Hanford and LIGO Livingston are in a place where, it's not LA, it's not New York City, and I think many people, including me, are more drawn to the cityscape and diversity of the people and the food. That aside, I did feel that I accomplished more and learned more, and that is because I was not working alone. I was also surrounded by the people who are the top of this field, and it's just not gonna get any better than that. And because this deadline has to be made, like whatever was delivered to us from MIT or Caltech has to work, whether it's the equipment or the design document. People work years in advance before commissioning breaks if they want to upgrade something or if they want to install a new system like Squeezer, for example. The parts were delivered from MIT and there's a little bit of mishaps here and there, but for the most part, it's fixable and it worked. And that's the important thing. And that's the same thing with the parts. Like the labs were really organized and fully stocked. I never had an issue of not finding an irises or stuff running out or couldn't find the right post because they have to be there. This is $1 billion instrument. You can't have scientists spending like half an hour looking for a post that has the right height. That's just unacceptable. I think that would be ridiculous too, to be honest. And because things have to move fast, working at the site is definitely less forgiving. Say, if you're a graduate student just sitting in a corner talking to no one, people are gonna assume that you have things to do, no one's gonna come talk to you, and you could just spend the rest of your stay missing out on all the funs because nobody really knows what you're up to and didn't really give you anything important to do because they think you already have things to do. So yeah, you can spend the rest of your stay like sitting in the corner doing stuff that nobody gives a shit about. If it turns out that you are a drag to a team, you will be sent to a corner as well because nobody can afford to deal with you. I didn't see that happen really often during my 2.5 years as an operator there and about 2 years going back to the site because advisors tend to not send their weak students to the site because that is where the institutions also get visibilities. If the students go there and misbehave, it's kind of your reputation as well as an institution. I definitely made a list of graduate school to apply based on the people that I met at the site. So yeah. Teamwork is an absolute must skill to have working at the big lab because there's only one big project and many people working towards the same goal, and that is to get the detector going, detecting more black holes and neutron stars and all that stuff. Working in a team was not my strong suit, I have to admit. When I started out, when there was another grad students there working on the same stuff, I was like, what do I do? How do we work together without stepping on each other's toes? But in the end, it's really all about figuring out what I was good at and what the other person was good at and focus on the things that I know I can do well and leave the other stuff to the other student. It's like finding my place in a giant machine. Like once I found that place and once the other students found that place, the whole machine was able to move forward. Places like LIGO sites have more people from different backgrounds, political backgrounds, educational backgrounds, doing different odd jobs, not just academics. Unfortunately, it's still mostly white. I can easily be walking by people who voted for Trump, but that does not matter. What matters is everybody does the job, get their shit done, and treat each other with respect. So now to the small lab. What is my take on working in a small lab? I follow my own schedule. I'm pretty much by myself. I get help from postdocs here and there, but I'm pretty much in control of my own experiment, which is the final chapter of my thesis. The time can pass and I can feel like I achieved nothing, and that can very well be true. If I slack off and don't go to the lab, I get nothing done, and it's really just up to me to fix it. There's nobody around you to push you out of bed or to push you to get things done. You just have to be really self-motivated, and the only deadline you have really is your graduation date. In a small lab, there's a chance to design your own experiment as well. Sadly, I didn't have a chance to design mine because when I came back from the LIGO site, I just didn't really know what next to do with my life. I didn't really have the time to read anything that was not commissioning related, so, well, can't have everything. So my final experiment was a preliminary design by someone else, and because of this LIGO big lab mindset, I was expecting that everything would just work. But no, it doesn't have to be like that because nobody spent months and years making sure this design worked all the way through. Postdocs can be responsible for more than just one task, and I guess that is a difference. Nobody is hired to just do one task, but versus the LIGO lab, there might just be one guy who does one job and is to design one system. Smaller labs, parts can be missing, and a lot of time you would have to scavenger hunt for the parts you need, and depending on the lab, you might not have the budget to order everything you need. So that is one thing to consider when you choose a grad school, I guess. Do they have budgets? Where's the money come from? What's the outlook for the next 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or however long you think it's gonna take for you to graduate? Smaller labs are more forgiving. If you've gone quiet for weeks, somebody, your advisor at least, should check on you. And a smaller lab is a place you come to learn how to lab. If you fuck up, no one's gonna kick you out or bar you from entering the lab. And I think that's a major difference between a smaller lab and places like the LIGO lab, because when I was working as an operator, I was sent to be trained to work with optics and lasers at Caltech. I was not trained at the site. I don't think people can afford me breaking stuff because I was working with high power laser as well. I don't think they could risk me breaking things that are already working. People, you are mostly surrounded by academics, people of a similar level of intelligence, so the lunch break conversation is definitely going to be more educational and more open to discussion. And another thing I want to mention is that the big lab, like the LIGO sites, take safety much more seriously. At least is what I feel. They have laser safety officer, they have general site safety officers, and you can't just wander into the equipment area or the LVEA without having any prior trainings or having passed any exams. I remember there were 2 sets of exams. There were general site safety related things and laser safety exams, which I had to be trained before I was allowed to even walk into the area where there was a laser enclosures. But here at ANU, you have one laser training guy that you just talk to for like 5 minutes and then off you go. You are now allowed to enter the lab. There were no other trainings. Also, have you ever looked for a stray beam coming off your table? If you haven't done that, I think your lab just doesn't take laser safety that seriously. Anyway, that's one last thing I wanted to point out. That is the main difference between the big lab like the LIGO sites and the smaller lab like an ANU lab. I do believe that too much paperwork is just a drag on the progress, and no safety at all is also not good. But I do believe there's a middle ground to be made where the safety, precaution, and the science can still progress at their respectable speed. And that's it for my take on a big lab versus a small lab. And what's your experience? Please share in the comment. I would love to hear from other people as well. If you think this video is useful, please give it some love, some thumbs up, and maybe consider subscribing. I would like you too to start paying for my Kautina and coffee by the end of 2020. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.